Yeah, so I'm Alex. I'm the marketing director at PushOn. It's an e-commerce agency based in Manchester and Edinburgh. So I'm going to chat today about CPC surges, the bane of our lives as PPC advertisers. So what are they? So they're an increase in CPC over a period of time, which results in the cost of traffic via Google Ads or any other paid platform to rise. When having these conversations with Google or any of the people in the kind of like Google space, the kind of common explanation that we get for the cause is that this can happen due to a variety of external factors like a change in composition, the ad position in line with campaign goals and seasonality. So what's to take from that is this kind of two sections. There's basically things that are within our control and things that are not necessarily within our control. And that's really important to take into account when looking at when CPCs are rising. So breaking that out, this is kind of a diagram or a kind of visual image of something I go over with clients when we're talking about why CPCs might have spiked over a period of time or CPCs are massively on the rise. And kind of to start with, looking at that first bit from that explanation from Google. First of all, it's an increase in competition and seasonality. So what this basically means is there's an increase in cost amongst the auctions and there are more advertisers in the space. So for example, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, times around Christmas, especially as an e-commerce agency, we find that the competition rises. And by that competition rising, it means that there's an increase in cost. That isn't something that us as advertisers have control over. We don't have control over other businesses and whether or not they can come into the auctions. Then kind of moving down, we've got increased personalization and automation. I mean, what Byron was talking about there, that's a massive level of automation that can get brought in and kind of a massive level of strategic kind of pieces behind CPC. So you can see people are a lot more advanced in the space now than ever before, especially with PMAX strategies and automated strategies that are in place. It means that there are elements of some control that we have, but also a lot more elements of control that we can kind of take away. So bringing it back down to kind of like the area that we have full control over is poor management of accounts and landing pages. So that is minimal best practice on our accounts and low quality scores. As all of us know, CPC is massively impacted by the landing pages that we have, and it's massively impacted by the quality scores that we have. If you've got an account sitting there and you're not managing it well, you're not optimizing bids, and your landing pages are poor, you're going to see some poor CPCs. So what are the challenges for us? Now, I normally break this out by micro and macro. So first of all, the cost of traffic increases, which means that ROAS drops. So effectively, we're paying more for either the same amount of traffic or we're basically having to pay more to drive the same level of conversions. That means that our return on ad spend is going to drop. Campaigns will hit their daily budgets faster, and that means that we're going to basically see a reduction in the visibility of products or ads. So if we're basically paying more within the same campaign budgets, then we're going to basically see our ads be limited, and it's going to mean that we're not necessarily going to get visibility. And that leads on to the fact that we're going to be outranked by competitors due to low impression share. Now, kind of looking at that from another level, you've got to take into account that when CPCs are rising, there's elements that get impacted from a macro perspective. And that means that our conversations are going to be a lot harder with our clients, and our conversations are going to be a lot harder with stakeholders in the business because PPC as a channel becomes slightly less profitable and it's harder to justify. It becomes harder to fill the funnel at the top as well. So if we're using our PPC campaigns for prospecting, for example, and we're using PPC campaigns to kind of drive low cost traffic and that CPC is increasing, it's going to become harder to kind of drive new users to the brand or new users to the website, and it becomes harder to fill the funnel at the top. And then we've got less budget to convert users at the bottom of the funnel as well. So either you've got those people coming down the funnel, that it's become a lot more expensive to get those guys down, or it kind of becomes a lot more expensive around the conversion piece, like I mentioned about the ROAS bit. So those kind of, again, conversations you're having with stakeholders, you're going, okay, PPC is costing us this much to drive this much revenue, or this much to drive this many leads. It becomes a bit more complicated when it becomes a lot more expensive. And the other element is that we've got to rely a lot more on organic search, which I'm sure the guys in the other rooms are kind of delighted to hear about. But if we've not got an organic search strategy in place, then it means that we're going to basically struggle to kind of clean up areas that we might be limiting our visibility because of the increase in CPCs. So one of the other things that we tend to look at, if there's people in this room that have multiple PPC accounts, you can obviously kind of have a look and benchmark yourself against other competitors, or you can have a benchmark yourself against other people in particular industries. That's really important. So one of the things that we tend to do is we basically kind of bring out a number of different industries and align ourselves with that and understand what's actually going on. It's all well and good for us to sit there and kind of look at our accounts and go, oh, this is performing really poorly, our CPCs are really high. But then having a look at potentially other data and understanding that is also so important, because you might actually not be driving traffic for a huge CPC. You might actually be below the industry average. And again, that's something that has to be communicated to people within your business or your clients as well. This will be on the push on website. So if anyone wants to grab it or speak to me afterwards, I can fire it over. I'll get to that link. So in the reality, what does this look like? So this is a B2C retail e-commerce client that we've had. Not necessarily the prettiest graph, but it basically is a CPC surge. So what we've got here is what probably a lot of advertisers in this room have experienced, and that was when COVID hit, we saw a massive drop in CPC. Now, this was mainly due to the fact that there are a number of different advertisers removing themselves from PPC due to restricted marketing budgets, and it meant that CPC dropped significantly. Then what we saw at the end of 2020 was basically more advertisers coming back into the space. With more advertisers coming back into the space, it basically meant that the CPCs again increased. Then what we saw, which was a tough day, which was basically us going into peak and all of the advertisers coming back into the space, and then also trying to recuperate all of that kind of revenue that they'd lost over the previous period. So there was a lot of aggressive PPC strategies, there's a lot of aggressive CPCs in place, which basically meant the account was quite hard to manage. Now, CPC is obviously one thing I'm chatting about, but the impact is what is on the ROAS. So during this kind of like long period of time, what we saw was the ROAS increased during a period of time where CPCs basically dropped, because we were able to drive a lot more traffic to the website for a lot less. Then we basically saw that kind of dip as basically the kind of advertisers came back into the space. And then what we saw was basically it kind of hit like rock bottom, and that was when the cost of traffic had become the most expensive it's been. What I'm kind of going to go through in the second half of this is kind of this sweet spot. So basically what we've seen here is we've seen the ROAS come up, but in line with that demand and in line with that CPC increase as well. It's basically how to kind of navigate this piece. Now, similar to what I was saying about the level of control that we have, it's massively important to look at the data and actually understand the root causes behind these things. If we understand root causes behind these things, it's a lot easier to explain to people, and it's also a lot easier to understand and make tactics off the back of it. So kind of taking those things out again, like that control versus non-control, we've got tools that help us understand changes outside of our control. So Google Trends, that's a key one that we can all use. If we've seen CPC increase, the first thing that we usually do is go look at Google Trends. Has something changed in the market? Has there been a shift in something? Has my product become a lot more popular? Then what we can do is align that with the auction insights in our Google Ads account and have a look as our impression share changed. Are we basically paying the same, or are we paying more to get the same number of impressions? Are there new competitors coming into the space, and what's their impression share looking like? Are we being outranked by them? And then align that with data that we can see in tools like SEMrush. So what we tend to do is take a view of what those competitors look like, what their spend might look like, and understand, okay, this new competitor's come in because we've got a new product and the new product's become a lot more popular. What does that look like, and what does their strategy look like? There's obviously a number of different other tools that you can use other than SEMrush. Then tools which are impacting CPC within our control. So obviously Google Ads, that's a key one for us. So what's our automated bid strategy? How is our CPC being impacted by the strategy that we've actually got in place at the moment? Is the automated bid strategy that we've got in place working? Then align that with GA4. So basically looking at GA4 and understanding, okay, what's the impact on maybe some of the other channels that we got? Is there a massive spike in interest? Does that align with anything that we're seeing on organic? Does that align with anything that we're seeing in direct? Anything that we can pull out of GA4 to understand, okay, what's the wider impact on traffic for the business? And then understanding the bid caps themselves. Basically, if we've got bid caps in place which are potentially allowing Google to spend a lot more, then it means that our CPCs are likely to rise, especially if you've got something like a target impression share or maximize clicks without a bid cap in place. So here's an example. So basically, I don't think many people in this room probably owned a Stanley Cup or a Stanley mug in 2022. But what we have seen is, just a kind of a random example, but pulling out Stanley mug, for example, as a search query, that is something that has spiked. Now, you can see that interest in time is massively increased. What that's done is you can basically see that there's a 179% increase in year-on-year change. The impact of that has been an increase in competition. You can see that it's coming up as high there. The chances are very simple, and you're going to see a CPC increase there. So basically, if you've seen stuff like this, there's likely going to be an increase in CPC. Then kind of drilling that down into the budget and the actual management of the account. So like I said, looking at your daily budget caps is key. You've got to be prepared in most instances that you're going to have to spend more, unless you've got some sort of limitation on how much you can spend. Then you've kind of got to have those conversations around, can we improve the conversion rate? Can we improve the average order value? Which might be a longer term strategic decision, but you've got to be able to be kind of open to maybe spending a bit more on your campaigns. Looking at the bid strategy and aligning that with the campaign types as well. So for example, have you got something in place at the moment which is mainly focused around shopping? If you've got Google Shopping in place, you're starting to see CPCs increase. Can you begin to align that with display? Can you begin to align that with video and build out something like PMAX? These kind of like simple changes and simple tweaks and experiments on the account usually result in better CPCs. And it's at least worth experimenting and doing an A/B test and aligning the bid strategy and the campaign type that you've got there. Then kind of bringing it back to the kind of the main thing that we focus on within Google search. And this is kind of something that is kind of maybe slightly overlooked, especially with a lot of advertisers now primarily using PMAX and using kind of a number of different other channels and other different strategies in place. There's actually just breaking down and looking at the quality score. So obviously we know user experience, keyword relevance, expected click-through rate are all things that are important elements of quality score. So we tend to, when we kind of first dig into this, look at the click-through rate. So ensuring that your keywords are going to match up with your ad copy, and your ad copy is relevant to the business and landing page, and kind of everything is joined up in that sense. And then ensuring that your ads are actually optimized. Have you got different themes that align with your ad copy? Are you using all of the different elements that you can bring into your ad copy? Ensuring that everything is consistently optimized and consistently relevant, and then kind of redoing that process as much as possible. It's just massively important to ensure that that basic piece is done before kind of like digging into some of the more advanced strategies. One of the things I always say to clients as well is that the landing page, the first interaction a customer will have with a brand, and they set the tone for the relationship. This is something that Google will take into account. Your landing page experience is a factor that you can see within Google Ads. It's given a score. This is something which in turn impacts your CPC. So we've got our keywords, we've then got our ads themselves, and then we basically break that out and we have our landing pages. What we tend to do here is if we're starting to see a poor CPC, we then align that with conversion rate optimization. So we basically will bring in either a Crow specialist, which we've got internally, or we'll take things like Microsoft Clarity. There's obviously things like Crazy Egg, Hotjar, all these different tools that we can align to actually understand the user behavior and understand, okay, are these landing pages actually performing quite well? A lot of us will talk about with our clients, oh, we're going to create some PPC specific landing pages. That's going to be the kind of solve for your CPC issues. That's all well and good, and that's great. That's a brilliant strategy to do, but you need to understand that the actual performance of the landing page is working. So again, using heat maps is one way to do that. Then what we tend to do is optimize that process. So basically understanding, okay, these landing pages are performing well or not, and then repeat the process, similar to what we would do with the ad copy and the keywords. Bringing that kind of like cycle into play and ensuring that that's being done consistently is going to be one way to massively improve your CPCs. So this is a case study from a B2B client. So this client basically saw high funnel costs due to a rise in CPC. So they had basically built out their entire funnel from awareness, engagement, conversion, and remarketing. They historically, as a brand, had quite high CPCs because it was B2B. And because of a number of different smaller businesses entering the space, it meant that there was a kind of massive rise in CPC over a period of time. This meant that the acquisition of traffic became more expensive, and the knock-on effect was the acquisition of leads became more expensive, which basically meant there was an increase in costs across the piece. So kind of the way that this was built out for them in 2022 was that we kind of, we had display at the top. So we had a 15 pence CPC on display. And then as we broke that a bit further down, we had non-brand search at category level. Then we had brand and non-brand search at product level. And then we had the remarketing strategy and the retention piece. And what we basically found was that by when we saw these CPC surges, that it became effectively too expensive for them to do prospecting and high quality prospecting via PPC. And also a number of their different terms, which had been historical, really strong terms, were becoming too expensive. So what we did is we basically moved things up slightly and combined a few campaign types. So we took the awareness piece and put YouTube in place of the display, and then combined the PMAX and the search and did non-brand search reported with non-brand PMAX with account level negatives. And what this meant is there was a considerable drop in the CPCs. So we found that the YouTube, obviously, a lot of us will have experienced, YouTube is very cheap traffic. And then what we found is the PMAX traffic combined with non-brand search was meaning that we were having a much lower CPC. So you can see that's a considerable decrease. Then what we did is we saw that the brand ads, they became slightly more expensive in line with non-brand search and the conversion bit, but ensuring that we had this linked up with their CRM meant that we weren't seeing negative impact on lead quality. So we had this full funnel in place, and it became a lot cheaper for them to do so and a lot cheaper for them to drive traffic. Again, with B2B, my recommendation would be that you've got something aligned with a CRM, because if you are making quite aggressive changes like this, you need to ensure that you're not seeing a negative impact on lead quality. So a couple bonus tips. Non-Google CSS. So a lot of people who run Google shopping campaigns will run Google ads through the Merchant Center through the Google CSS. There's obviously been quite a few changes over the years, but we're now able to run different CSSs within Google Merchant Center. What we found is by aligning this and bringing in a different CSS, we're seeing a 20% either increase in traffic on a number of different campaigns or a number of different advertising within Google Ads, or we're basically seeing a dip in CPC. Now, this is something you would likely see over a longer period of time. However, as you can see again from the Stanley Cup example there are quite a number of different advertisers in the space who are doing that. It's something, again, that if you're not doing, you're potentially missing out on as well. And then secondly, using the click fraud tool. So ensuring that you've got something in place that if you are seeing an increase in traffic, then you're basically paying for better traffic. Obviously, the two core metrics I mentioned earlier on around conversion rate and average order value, if these are two metrics that you can improve quite aggressively, then it's going to mean that if there is an increase in the cost of traffic, then it's not necessarily going to impact your account in as negative a way. Ensuring that you've got better traffic coming to the site is obviously one way to do that, and using the click fraud tool is something that we've used on a few accounts to do that as well, and improve performance. So, 3 key takeaways from this. First of all, CPC surges are not always within our control. I've got myself down a couple times looking at the cost of traffic and being like, this is all my fault. But it's not often. There are a number of different reasons for this, and it's really important that we understand that some are and some aren't within our control. Understanding the surge is half the battle. I always say this. We've got to understand why our CPCs are increasing if we're going to make relevant tactical decisions to combat it. And budget caps, quality score, and campaign structure are the kind of key 3 areas that I would to navigate in. Thank you very much.